Hey, you. Yeah, you, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments below, and if you love crazy stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Okay, let's get started. My name's Jake, and I'm just a regular guy who loves playing ping pong. It's a super fun game where you hit a little ball back and forth with paddles. I got a brand new ping pong table and decided to set it up in my front yard one sunny Saturday. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I was ready to have a good time with my friends. It wasn't anything big or fancy, just a table, some paddles, and a ball. I thought it'd be a perfect way to enjoy the day. But oh boy, I had no idea trouble was waiting for me right across the street. Let me tell you about Linda. She's the lady who lives in the house with the perfect lawn and the super shiny mailbox. Everyone in the neighborhood calls her the HOA Queen. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, which is like a group of people who make rules for our street. Linda loves those rules more than anything. She's always walking around with a clipboard in her hand, writing stuff down and telling people what they're doing wrong. She's got this mean stare that makes you feel like you're in trouble, even if you didn't do anything bad. It's so strong it could melt ice on a hot day. And she's super nosy, she's always peeking out her window or asking questions about what everyone's up to. If someone parks their car a little crooked or forgets to mow their grass, Linda's there in a flash, ready to complain. Now, I've lived on this street for a while, and most people are pretty nice. We wave at each other, say hi, and sometimes chat about the weather. But Linda? She's different. She acts like she's the boss of everyone. If you put up a new mailbox or paint your fence, she's right there, telling you it's not allowed unless she says so. People listen to her because they don't want trouble. They think she's in charge of the whole block, like she's the queen of Maple Street. And for a long time, I thought so too. I mean, she's loud, she's bossy, and she's always got that clipboard ready to write down your mistakes. Who wouldn't think she's the big deal around here? But here's the thing, Linda didn't know I was about to find out something huge. Something that would flip everything upside down and make her wish she'd never messed with me. That sunny Saturday started out so normal. I woke up early because I was excited about my new ping pong table. It was bright green with white lines, and it came with 2 paddles and a little white ball. I carried it out to the front yard with my buddy Mike. Mike's my best friend, he's tall, funny, and really good at ping pong. We set the table up right there on the grass, not too close to the street but not hidden behind the house either. I wanted everyone to see it and maybe come join us for a game. I figured it'd be a fun way to bring the neighborhood together, you know? The day was perfect. The sky was blue with just a few fluffy clouds floating by. A little breeze kept things cool, and I could hear kids laughing a few houses down. Mike and I started playing right away. The ball went ping off my paddle, then pong off his. Back and forth, back and forth. We were laughing and shouting stuff like, "You can't beat me," and "Watch this shot." It felt so good to be outside, having fun, not worrying about anything. I thought, this is what weekends are all about. I even waved at Mr. Thompson, the old guy who lives next door. He was watering his flowers and gave me a thumbs up. Everything was great until Linda showed up. I didn't see her at first. I was too busy trying to win against Mike. He's sneaky with his spins, and I had to focus hard to keep up. But then I heard this loud huffing sound, like someone was really mad. I looked up, and there she was, Linda, standing on the edge of my yard with her arms crossed. Her clipboard was tucked under one arm, and her face was all scrunched up like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. She didn't say hi or smile or anything nice. She just stared at me and my ping pong table like we'd done something terrible. I stopped playing and said, "Hey, Linda, what's up?" I tried to sound friendly, but my stomach did a little flip. I knew that look. It was the look she gave people right before she started yelling. Mike stopped too and leaned on the table, watching her. Linda took a big step closer and pointed at the table. "What is that doing here?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, like a teacher catching you chewing gum in class. I blinked and said, It's a ping pong table. We're just playing." I thought maybe she'd never seen one before or something. But she shook her head so fast her glasses almost fell off. "This is against the rules," she said, pulling out her clipboard and flipping through the pages. She held it up like it was proof I was some kind of criminal. "The HOA doesn't allow outdoor games in the front yard. It's an eyesore. It makes the whole street look messy. I looked at my table. It was brand new, shiny, and honestly pretty cool. An eyesore? Really? I didn't get it. Mike laughed a little and said, "Come on, Linda, it's just a game. It's not hurting anyone." But that only made her madder. Her cheeks turned red, and she jabbed her finger at us. "You think this is funny? I'm in charge of keeping this neighborhood nice, and I won't let you ruin it with this thing." She said thing like my table was a pile of garbage. I started to feel annoyed. It was my yard, my table, and I wasn't breaking any big laws. Why was she acting like I'd started a war? Linda didn't stop there. She took a deep breath and kept going. "I've been watching you, Jake," she said, narrowing her eyes. "You think you can do whatever you want, but not on my street. I'm calling the cops if you don't take this down right now." The cops? Over a ping pong table? I couldn't believe it. Mike's jaw dropped, and he whispered, "Is she serious?" I shrugged, but inside I was starting to worry. Linda didn't look like she was joking. She had that wild gleam in her eyes, like she was ready to fight until she won. I didn't want trouble with the police, but I also didn't want to let her boss me around for no good reason. So, I tried to stay calm. "Linda," I said, "it's just a table. We're having fun. Can't you let it go this time?" I even smiled, hoping she'd chill out. But nope, she wasn't having it. She smirked, and it wasn't a nice smirk. It was the kind that says, "I'm better than you, and I'm going to prove it." Then she said something that made my skin crawl, "You'll regret crossing me, Jake." Whoa. That sounded like a threat. Mike nudged me and muttered, "She's nuts." I nodded, but I didn't know what to do. Take the table down and let her win? Or keep playing and see what she'd do next? It felt like a showdown right there in my front yard. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Linda thought she had all the power. She thought she could scare me with her clipboard and her rules and her big talk about the cops. And yeah, everyone on the street thought she was the queen of everything too. If Linda said jump, most people asked, "How high?" She'd been bossing folks around for years, telling Mrs. Carter her roses were too red, telling Tim down the block his dog barked too loud. Nobody ever stood up to her because she was loud and mean and always acted like she knew best. But that day, something felt different. I didn't know it yet, but Linda was hiding something. Something big. And my little ping pong table? It was about to mess up her whole game. Let's back up a bit. See, I'd heard whispers about Linda before. Little things neighbors said when she wasn't around. Like how she'd fine people for stuff that wasn't even in the rules. Or how she'd yell at kids for riding bikes too fast, even though they weren't hurting anyone. Mr. Thompson once told me she tried to make him pay extra HOA money for planting a tree in his own yard. A tree. He laughed about it, but I could tell it bugged him. And then there was the time she told Sarah, the nice mom 2 houses down, that her Halloween decorations were tacky. Sarah took them down the next day, and I saw her eyes all red like she'd been crying. Linda had a way of making people feel small, and she loved it. I never really cared much about her before. I kept my grass cut, my trash cans hidden, and stayed out of her way. But that Saturday, with my ping pong table shining in the sun, I guess I became her next target. She stood there, glaring at me, waiting for me to back down. I could have taken the table inside and avoided the drama. But something in me said, no way. It wasn't just about the table anymore. It was about Linda thinking she could control everyone, all the time. I didn't know how far she'd take it, but I was about to find out. And trust me, what happened next? It was wilder than I ever expected. So, here's a question for you, have you ever had a neighbor who thought they owned the whole street? Maybe they told you what you could or couldn't do, like they were the king or queen of everything. Tell me about it in the comments. I want to hear your stories. For me, that was Linda. She thought she ruled Maple Street, and for a while, she did. But that sunny Saturday, with my ping pong table and her big attitude, something was about to change. She didn't know it yet, but I was about to stumble onto a secret that would flip her little kingdom upside down. Stick around, because this story's just getting started. Okay, so picture this, it's a sunny Saturday, and I'm out in my front yard with my best buddy, Mike. We're having a blast playing ping pong. The little white ball is bouncing back and forth, ping, pong, and we're laughing like crazy. The table's all set up, shiny and green, right there on the grass. I'm swinging my paddle, trying to beat Mike, who's super good at this game. Everything's fun and happy, and I'm thinking, man, this is the best day ever. But then, out of nowhere, here comes Linda. You know Linda, the HOA queen from across the street. She's the lady with the clipboard and the mean face who thinks she's the boss of everyone. And oh boy, she's not happy. She storms over to my yard like she's on some big mission. Her shoes are clomping on the sidewalk, and her arms are swinging like she's ready to fight. She stops right at the edge of my grass, and I can see her eyes squinting at me. She's mad, really mad. I'm still holding my paddle, and Mike's got the ball in his hand, and we both freeze. Linda doesn't even say hi or anything nice. She just yells, "This is a violation." Her voice is loud and sharp, like a dog barking at a stranger. She's holding her HOA rulebook, a big, thick book full of boring rules, and she's waving it around like it's a sword or a magic wand. She points at my ping pong table and says, "Outdoor games are an eyesore, and I'm calling the cops." I blink at her. The cops? For real? Over a ping pong table? I mean, it's just a table. It's not loud or messy or hurting anyone. It's just me and Mike hitting a tiny ball back and forth for fun. I try to stay calm because I don't want to fight. I take a deep breath and say, "Linda, it's just a game. We're not bothering anybody." My voice is nice and steady, even though inside I'm starting to feel a little nervous. I look at the table, it's clean, it's new, it's not even in the way. Why is she so upset about this? But Linda doesn't care what I say. She shakes her head so fast her hair bounces, and she keeps going like I didn't even talk. An eyesore, she snaps again. This makes the whole street look bad. You can't just put junk like this out here. Junk? My table isn't junk. It's awesome. I spent my own money on it, and I was so excited to play. But Linda's acting like I parked an old, rusty car in the yard or something. She flips open her rulebook and starts reading out loud. Section 5, Paragraph 3, no outdoor recreational equipment allowed in front yards without HOA approval. She looks up at me with this big, smug smile, like she's won some kind of prize. You didn't ask me, Jake. You broke the rules. Mike, who's still standing by the table, starts to giggle. He's got this goofy grin on his face, and he says, "Come on, Linda, it's just ping pong. It's not like we're throwing a wild party or anything." He's trying to lighten things up, you know? Make her laugh a little. But oh no, that's a big mistake. Linda's face turns red like tomato red and she glares at Mike so hard I think she might shoot lasers out of her eyes. "You think this is funny?" she yells. "This is my neighborhood, and I'm in charge of keeping it nice. You two are ruining everything." I can feel my heart beating faster now. I don't like yelling, and I really don't like trouble. But Linda's making this into a huge deal, and I don't know why. I try again to calm her down. "Linda," I say, "it's just for today. We'll move it later, okay?" I'm hoping she'll chill out if I promise to fix it. But she doesn't chill out. Not even a little bit. She crosses her arms, and that smirk comes back on her face. It's not a happy smirk, it's a mean one, like she's got a secret plan. Then she says something that makes my stomach twist. "You'll regret crossing me, Jake," she says, all slow and creepy. "You'll see." Whoa. That sounds like a threat. Like she's warning me that something bad's coming. Mike looks at me with wide eyes and whispers, "Dude, she's crazy." I nod a little, but I don't say anything back. My blood's starting to boil like when you're so mad you feel hot all over, but I don't want her to know that. I don't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. So instead, I just smile. Yup, I smile right at her, big and fake, and say, "Okay, Linda. Do what you gotta do." Then I turn back to Mike and smack the ball over the net. Ping. It bounces right to him, and he hits it back. Pong. We keep playing like she's not even there. Linda stands there for a second, watching us. I can feel her staring, and it's like her eyes are burning holes in my back. But I don't look at her. I just keep hitting the ball, ping, pong, and act like everything's fine. Inside, though, I'm wondering, is she serious? Is she really going to call the cops over this? I mean, it's a ping pong table, not a crime. What would the police even say? Sorry, Jake, you're under arrest for having too much fun? It sounds silly, but Linda's so mad, I'm starting to think she might actually do it. And that smirk she gave me? It stuck in my head. What does she mean, I'll regret it? What's she planning? Let me tell you a little more about Linda, so you get why this is such a big deal. She's not just some grumpy lady who doesn't like fun. She's the HOA queen, remember? That means she's got power, at least, she thinks she does. She's been bossing people around on Maple Street for years. Like, forever. If you put up a new swing set or plant a bush she doesn't like, she's at your door with that rule book, telling you to take it down. She's got this way of talking that makes you feel small, like you're a kid who got caught sneaking cookies. And most people just listen to her because it's easier than fighting. Take Mr. Thompson, the old guy next door. He's super nice and loves his garden. One time, he put up a little birdhouse in his tree. It was cute, painted blue with a tiny roof. But Linda marched over and told him it wasn't approved. She said it looked cheap and made the street ugly. Mr. Thompson tried to argue, but she just kept talking over him, waving that rule book. In the end, he took it down, and I saw him shake his head like he was sad. Or there's Sarah, the mom with 2 little kids. She hung some Christmas lights last year, nothing wild, just a few strings on her porch. Linda said they were too bright and against the rules. Sarah took them down the next day, and her kids were bummed out. That's what Linda does, she pushes until you give up. So when she said she'd call the cops on me, I wasn't totally shocked. She loves throwing her weight around. But still, it felt nuts. I mean, the police have better things to do, right? Like catching real bad guys, not chasing ping pong players. I kept playing with Mike, but my brain was spinning. What if she did call? Would they laugh at her? Or would they actually come and tell me to stop? I didn't want a big scene with flashing lights and neighbors staring. I just wanted to play my game and enjoy my Saturday. But Linda wasn't letting this go. I could tell she was serious. She had that look, like a cat about to pounce on a mouse. Mike hit the ball to me, and I almost missed it because I was thinking so hard. Dude, focus, he laughed. I shook my head and hit it back. Pong. Sorry, I said. She's freaking me out. Mike grinned and said, she's all talk. No way she'll call the cops. That's too crazy, even for her. I wanted to believe him. Mike's usually right about stuff, he's smart like that. But something about Linda's voice, that "you'll regret it" line, stuck with me. It wasn't just talk. It felt like a promise. And I didn't like it one bit. The sun was still shining, and the birds were still chirping, but the fun was starting to fade. Every time I hit the ball, I kept glancing at Linda out of the corner of my eye. She hadn't moved. She was just standing there, arms crossed, watching us like a hawk. It was creepy. I tried to ignore her, but it was hard. My hands were getting sweaty on the paddle, and my swings weren't as good. Mike noticed and said, "Hey, don't let her ruin this. We're winning against her just by playing." He was right, we weren't giving in. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had something up her sleeve. Then it hit me, she loves winning. That's her whole thing. She doesn't care if she's right or wrong, she just wants to be the boss. And me playing ping pong after she told me to stop? That was like a challenge to her. I was saying, "You don't control me," without even saying it out loud. And Linda? She hates that. She hates when people don't listen. I remembered how she yelled at Tim, the guy with the loud dog. His pup barked a lot, sure, but it was just a dog being a dog. Linda fined him $50 and said she'd call animal control if he didn't shut it up. Tim paid the fine, even though he grumbled about it. That's how she works, she keeps pushing until you cave. But I wasn't caving. Not yet. I hit the ball again, ping, and Mike sent it back, pong. We kept going, and I tried to focus on the game. The sound of the ball bouncing was loud in my ears, and I told myself, she's not gonna ruin this. No way. But deep down, I was worried. What if she wasn't bluffing? What if she really called 911 and said I was causing trouble? I pictured a cop car pulling up, lights flashing, and an officer walking over. "Sir, "We got a call about a ping pong table," he'd say. It sounded so dumb, but with Linda, anything was possible. Here's the crazy part, though, Linda didn't know her big plan was about to flop. She thought she was so smart, waving that rulebook and threatening me with the cops. She thought I'd scare easy and take the table down. But something was coming, something she'd never guess. Her little power trip was about to backfire, and I didn't even know it yet. I just kept playing, pretending she wasn't there, while she stood on my lawn like she owned it. What do you think? Was she bluffing, or was she really gonna call 911 over a ping pong table? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Okay, so here's what happened next. After Linda stormed off, yelling about my ping pong table, things got quiet. Way too quiet. The sun was still shining, and the breeze was still blowing, but it didn't feel fun anymore. Me and Mike kept playing ping, pong, hitting that little white ball back and forth across the table. The sound was loud in my ears, and I tried to focus on the game. Mike was laughing, swinging his paddle like a pro, and I was trying to keep up. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about Linda. She'd said she'd call the cops, and that creepy "you'll regret it" line kept bouncing around in my head. Was she really that mad about a table? I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. For the next hour, we just played. The ball went back and forth, and Mike kept teasing me. "You're scared of her, huh?" he said with a big grin. I rolled my eyes and hit the ball hard. Ping. "No way," I said. "She's just loud. She won't do anything." But I wasn't so sure. Every few minutes, I'd sneak a peek across the street at Linda's house. Her curtains were closed, and her porch was empty. No sign of her. That should have made me feel better, right? Like maybe she gave up and went inside to cool off. But instead, it made me nervous. It was too quiet, like the calm before a storm. You know that feeling when you're waiting for something to happen, but you don't know what? That's how I felt. Mike didn't seem worried. He's my best friend, and he's super chill. He's tall, with messy brown hair, and he's always cracking jokes. He swung his paddle and sent the ball spinning my way. I missed it, and it bounced off the table onto the grass. "Ha! You're distracted," he laughed, running to grab it. I fake glared at him and said, "Yeah, well, you'd be distracted too if Linda was after you." He tossed the ball back and shrugged. "She's all talk, Jake. No way she'd call the cops over this. That's too nuts, even for her." I wanted to believe him. Mike's usually right about stuff, he's got good instincts. But this time, I wasn't so sure. We kept playing, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. It was getting hot, and my shirt was sticking to my back. I wiped sweat off my forehead and hit the ball again. Pong. Mike caught it and sent it back fast. We were in a good rhythm, and for a little while, I almost forgot about Linda. Almost. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. Movement. I turned my head just a bit, still swinging my paddle, and there she was, Linda. She was standing on her porch now, right across the street. She wasn't close, but I could see her clear as day. She had her phone pressed to her ear, and she was staring right at me. Her eyes were locked on me like I'd done something awful, like I'd kicked her dog or smashed her favorite flower pot. My stomach flipped. What was she doing? Who was she talking to? I missed the ball again, and it rolled under the table. Mike groaned. "Come on, man, focus." But I couldn't. I straightened up and looked at Linda, squinting to see better. She was talking fast, her mouth moving a mile a minute. And then I heard her. Her voice was loud, super loud, and it carried across the street like she wanted me to hear. "Yes, officer," she said, "there's a disturbance on Maple Street. Send someone quick." My jaw dropped. Like, it literally fell open, and I stood there with my mouth hanging like a fish. She did it. She actually called the cops. Over a ping pong table. Mike heard it too. He stopped playing and turned to look. "No way," he whispered. "She's nuts." I nodded, still staring at her. Linda hung up the phone and crossed her arms, that mean smirk back on her face. She didn't move, just stood there on her porch, glaring at me like she'd won some big prize. I couldn't believe it. My heart started pounding, and my hands got all sweaty on the paddle. The cops? Really? I looked at my table, it was just a table. Green, shiny, sitting there on the grass. It wasn't loud or messy or dangerous. It was fun. And now Linda was acting like I was some kind of criminal. I felt mad and scared all at once, like a big knot was twisting in my chest. I turned to Mike. She called them, I said, my voice shaking a little. She actually called the cops. Mike's eyes got wide, but then he laughed. Dude, this is wild. What are they gonna do, arrest you for ping pong? He was trying to make me laugh, and I did a little. But it wasn't funny, not really. I kept picturing a police car pulling up, lights flashing, and an officer walking over. Sir, put down the paddle, he'd say. You're under arrest for breaking HOA rules. It sounded so silly, but with Linda, I didn't know what to expect. She was serious, she'd made the call. And now we had to wait and see what happened. But here's where it gets juicy. Really juicy. Linda hung up her phone and stood there, smirking like she'd beat me. She thought she had me trapped, like a mouse in a cage. I was still staring at her, trying to figure out what to do, when I noticed something weird. Something super weird. A car was rolling up the street slow and quiet, no sirens or lights. It was a police car, black and white, with the word police written on the side in big letters. My heart jumped into my throat. Were they here already? That was fast, too fast. Linda had just hung up, like, 10 seconds ago. How could they get here so quick? The car kept coming, creeping along like it didn't want to be seen. I nudged Mike and pointed. Look. I whispered. He turned, and his mouth opened too. Whoa, he said. Are they here for you? I didn't know. My hands were shaking now, and I gripped my paddle tight. The car rolled closer, and I braced myself. I thought maybe they'd stop in front of my house, and an officer would get out and ask about the disturbance. I'd have to explain that it was just a ping pong table, and Linda was mad about nothing. I was ready to talk, ready to stay calm, even though my insides were flipping like crazy. But then the car did something I didn't expect. It didn't stop at my house. It kept going right past my yard and parked in front of Linda's house. Right there, in her driveway. I blinked hard, like maybe I was seeing things. Mike said, "Wait, what?" and we both stared. The car's lights were off, and it was super quiet, no sirens, no noise at all. Linda was still on her porch, and she didn't move. She didn't wave at the car or anything. She just kept glaring at me, like she hadn't even noticed it. But I noticed. Oh, I noticed big time. My brain started spinning. Wait a sec, were they here for me, or was something else going on? Linda had just called the cops, right? So they should be coming for my table. But why were they at her house? I looked at Mike, and he looked back at me, all confused. Dude, he said, what's happening? I shook my head. I don't know. But I had a hunch, a little tickle in my mind that said maybe this wasn't about me at all. Maybe Linda's big plan wasn't going the way she thought. Maybe something else was up, something she didn't see coming. The car just sat there, parked in her driveway. No one got out, not yet. It was like they were waiting for something. I couldn't stop staring. Linda was still on her porch, phone in her hand, acting all proud like she'd scared me good. But that police car? It was throwing me off. If they were here for me, why weren't they over here? Why were they at her place? My hunch was growing bigger, like a balloon filling up with air. Something was wrong, or maybe something was right, but not for Linda. I didn't know what yet, but it was making my skin tingle. Mike leaned on the table and whispered, maybe they're lost. I snorted. Lost? At her house? No way. He grinned. Okay, then maybe they're here for her secret alien collection. I laughed, and it felt good to laugh, even for a second. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was big. Linda thought she'd won by calling the cops on me. She thought she'd teach me a lesson about her rules and her power. But that car in her driveway? It was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. And I was starting to think it was about to turn this whole mess upside down. So there we were, me and Mike, standing by the ping pong table, paddles in our hands, watching that quiet police car. Linda was still glaring, still smirking, totally clueless about what was happening right behind her. The next few minutes were gonna change everything, and I didn't even know it yet. But I could feel it like a buzz in the air. Something juicy was coming, and it was gonna be good. Stick around, because this story's about to get even crazier. So, there we were, me and Mike, standing by my ping pong table, staring across the street. The police car was parked right in Linda's driveway, quiet as a mouse. No lights, no sirens, just sitting there like it was waiting for something. Linda was still on her porch, smirking at me like she'd won the biggest game ever. She'd just called the cops, saying there was a disturbance on Maple Street because of my ping pong table. My jaw was still dropped from hearing her make that call. I mean, who calls 911 over a game? But now, with that car at her house, I was super confused. Were they here for me, like she wanted? Or was something else going on? My hunch was buzzing louder now, telling me this wasn't what it looked like. Mike scratched his head and looked at me. Dude, this is weird, he said. Why are they at her place? I shrugged, but my eyes stayed glued to that car. I don't know, I said. Maybe she messed up. Mike grinned big. Huh? Maybe she called the cops on herself by accident. I laughed a little, picturing Linda dialing 911 and saying, "Help, I'm too bossy." But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Linda was smart, annoying, but smart. She wouldn't make a mistake like that. No, something bigger was happening, and I could feel it in my bones. The sun was beating down now, making the grass all warm under my sneakers. The ping pong ball was still lying on the ground where I'd dropped it, and the paddles were sweaty in our hands. We'd stopped playing because this was way more interesting than our game. I squinted at Linda's porch. She was still standing there, arms crossed, phone dangling from her fingers. She looked so proud, like she'd just saved the neighborhood from some awful crime. But she hadn't noticed the police car yet, or if she had, she didn't care. That made me even more curious. Why wasn't she freaking out? If I'd called the cops and they parked at my house, I'd be nervous. But Linda? She was cool as ice. I took a step closer to the edge of my yard, trying to see better. The car's windows were dark, so I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. It just sat there, all sneaky and quiet. Mike followed me, leaning over the table. "What do you think they're doing?" he whispered, like we were spies or something. "Waiting," I said. But for what? My heart was thumping fast now, like it knew something I didn't. I kept thinking about Linda's call, "Send someone quick." And how fast that car showed up. Too fast. It didn't add up. Cops don't zoom over that quick for a ping pong table, right? Unless it wasn't about me at all. That's when I started to wonder. What if Linda had bigger problems than my table? She was always bossing people around, making rules, yelling about stuff. Maybe she'd ticked off someone else. Maybe this wasn't her big win, it was her big mess. I looked at Mike and said, "You think she's in trouble?" He raised his eyebrows. Her? Trouble? Not, she's too mean to get caught. But then he paused and added, "Well, maybe." We both looked back at her house. The car hadn't moved, and Linda was still glaring at me like I was the only bad guy on the block. Let me tell you more about Linda, so you get why this felt so strange. She's the HOA queen, right? That means she's in charge of all the boring rules, like no loud music, no ugly fences, no fun stuff unless she says okay. She's got that clipboard, and she's always writing things down. If your grass gets too long, she's there with a fine. If your dog barks, she's there with a warning. She's like a teacher who never stops giving homework. Everyone on Maple Street knows her, and most people just do what she says because it's easier. Like, Mrs. Carter down the road, she had a little garden gnome by her mailbox. Linda said it was tacky and made her take it away. Mrs. Carter grumbled, but she did it. That's Linda's power. But sometimes, I'd hear whispers. Little bits of talk when Linda wasn't around. Like how she'd charge extra HOA fees for no reason. Or how she'd threaten people with big fines over tiny things. Mr. Thompson, my nice old neighbor, once told me she tried to make him pay $50 for planting a tree. A tree. He said it wasn't even in the rules, but Linda made it up and acted like it was real. He paid it because he didn't want her banging on his door every day. And then there was Tim, the guy with the loud dog. Linda fined him over and over until he started keeping his pup inside all the time. People didn't like her, but they didn't fight her either. She was too loud, too pushy. So, standing there with Mike, I started thinking, what if Linda's tricks were catching up to her? What if someone finally said, enough, and called the cops on her? It was just a guess, but it made my hunch grow bigger. I mean, that car wasn't moving, and it wasn't here for me, not yet, anyway. I looked at Linda again. She was still on her porch, still smirking, still acting like she'd won. But I could see her tapping her foot now, like she was getting antsy. Maybe she was starting to wonder why the cops weren't over here yelling at me. Maybe she was starting to sweat a little. Mike picked up the ball and bounced it on the table. Thump, thump, thump. Should we keep playing? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, let's act normal. I didn't want Linda to think she'd scared me. So we started again, ping, pong, but I kept one eye on her house. The ball flew back and forth, and Mike was winning because I couldn't focus. Every hit, I'd glance over. The car was still there, still quiet. No doors opened, no one got out. It was like a ghost car, just sitting and watching. And Linda? She was pacing now back and forth on her porch, still holding her phone. Her smirk was fading, and her face looked tighter, like she was annoyed. That's when I saw something else. A little flicker in her window. The curtain moved just a tiny bit, like someone peeked out and then hid again. I stopped playing and stared. Mike, look. I hissed. He missed the ball and turned. What? He said. Her window, something moved. He squinted. Maybe it's her cat. Linda had a big fluffy cat named Mr. Whiskers. I'd seen it sitting on her porch sometimes, looking grumpy like her. But this didn't feel like a cat. It was too quick, too sneaky. I don't think so, I said. Something's up. Mike bounced the ball again. You're paranoid, dude. It's just Linda being Linda. But I wasn't so sure. My hunch was screaming now something was wrong, and it was all tied to that car. I looked back at Linda. She'd stopped pacing and was staring at her phone, like she was waiting for it to ring. Her foot tapped faster, and her smirk was totally gone. She didn't look so powerful anymore. She looked worried. And that made me feel weird. Linda never looked worried. She was always loud and sure, like nothing could touch her. But now, something was off. The police car still didn't move. I started counting in my head: 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Nothing happened. No lights, no sounds, just that creepy quiet. Mike hit the ball to me, and I swung too hard, ping, sending it flying into the grass. Oops, I said, running to grab it. As I bent down, I peeked at Linda's house again. The curtain flickered once more, and this time I was sure it wasn't a cat. It was a person. Someone was inside, watching. My heart skipped a beat. Who was it? Linda lived alone, except for Mr. Whiskers. Was someone else in there? Or was I imagining things? I stood up with the ball and walked back to the table. Mike, I whispered, I think someone's in her house. He frowned. Like who? I don't know, I said. But it's weird, right? The car, the curtain, her acting funny. Mike nodded slowly. Yeah, it's weird. We both looked across the street. Linda was back to pacing, muttering to herself. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her hands were waving around like she was mad. And that car? Still parked, still silent. It was like a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was dying to figure it out. Here's what I started thinking: maybe Linda wasn't as in control as she thought. She'd called the cops to scare me, but what if they were already onto her? What if someone else had tipped them off about something she'd done? She was always pushing people around, fining them, threatening them, making up rules. Maybe she'd gone too far, and now it was coming back to bite her. That police car didn't feel like her victory anymore. It felt like trouble for her, not me. My hunch was growing into a big idea, and it was making me tingle all over. Mike hit the ball again, Pong, and I caught it this time. We kept playing, but my mind was racing. Linda was on her porch, the car was in her driveway, and someone was in her house. It was all adding up to something wild. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel the story shifting. Linda thought she'd ruin my day with that phone call, but she didn't see what was sneaking up on her. The next few minutes were gonna be huge, I just didn't know how huge yet. But trust me, it was gonna flip everything upside down. So, we're still playing ping pong, but it's not the same. The ball's bouncing ping, pong, but I'm only half into it. My eyes keep darting across the street. Linda's pacing faster now, her phone clutched tight in her hand. She's not smirking anymore, she's frowning, and her face is all scrunched up like she's mad or confused. The police car's still parked, still quiet, and that curtain in her window? It's still now, but I can't forget how it moved. Someone's in there, I'm sure of it. Mike's hitting the ball like nothing's wrong, but I can tell he's curious too. He keeps glancing over when he thinks I'm not looking. I hit the ball back, Pong, and whisper, "She's freaking out." Mike nods. "Yeah, she doesn't look happy." We both sneak another peek. Linda's muttering louder now, and I catch a few words: stupid, rules, fix this. She's talking to herself, waving her phone like it's gonna solve everything. But it's not solving anything, and that police car's still sitting there like a big, silent warning. I start to feel a little grin inside. Maybe Mike's right, maybe she's in trouble, and she doesn't even know it yet. Maybe her big plan to ruin my day is falling apart. The sun's getting hotter, and my throat's dry. I wish I'd brought some water out, but I'm too hooked on this to go inside. I hit the ball again, ping, and it bounces off Mike's paddle. He sends it back, and we keep going, but my brain's somewhere else. I'm thinking about all the times Linda's been mean. Like when she yelled at Sarah's kids for riding their bikes on the sidewalk. She said it was dangerous, even though they were just little kids with training wheels. Or when she fined Mr. Thompson for that tree. Or when she told Tim his dog was a nuisance and threatened to call animal control. She's been picking on people forever, and no one stopped her. But now it feels like something's shifting. I start to wonder, what if the cops aren't here for me at all? What if they're here for her? Maybe someone got fed up and told on her. Maybe Mr. Thompson called about that fake tree fine. Or Sarah reported her for being mean to her kids. Or Tim said something about those dog threats. Linda's made a lot of enemies on Maple Street, she just doesn't know it because everyone's too scared to say it to her face. But what if someone finally did? What if that police car's here because she's been breaking rules, not me? My hunch is buzzing like a beehive now, and I can't wait to see what happens. Mike hits the ball too hard, and it flies past me into the bushes. "Oops," he says, laughing. I run to get it, crouching down to dig through the leaves. As I grab the ball, I peek at Linda's house again. She's stopped pacing and is staring at her phone, tapping it like she's trying to call someone. But no one's answering, I can tell because her frown gets deeper. She shakes the phone and mutters something I can't hear. Then she looks up right at me and her eyes narrow. She points at me, like she's saying, "This is your fault." I stand up with the ball and wave at her, all innocent like. "Hi, Linda." I call, just to mess with her. Mike snickers behind me. Linda doesn't wave back. She huffs and turns away, stomping back and forth on her porch again. She's mad, really mad, and it's starting to show. Her perfect hair's getting messy, and her clipboard's nowhere in sight. That's weird, she always has that clipboard. Where'd it go? Did she drop it inside? Or is she too flustered to care? I toss the ball to Mike and say, "She's losing it." He catches it and nods. Yup. This is better than TV. We both laugh, but I'm still watching that car. It's been there too long, way too long for a quick stop. Something's up, and it's not about my ping pong table. I start playing again, ping pong, but my mind's racing. What if Linda's been doing shady stuff? Like, really bad stuff? She's always collecting HOA money, dues, fines, whatever. What if she's keeping some of it? I've heard stories about people stealing from groups like that. Or what if she's been faking rules to boss people around? That tree fine on Mr. Thompson didn't sound real. Maybe she's been making things up for years, and someone found proof. My hunch is turning into a big guess now, and it's making me excited. If I'm right, Linda's in for a surprise, and not a good one. The police car's door finally moves just a tiny bit. I freeze mid-swing, and the ball bounces off the table. "Mike, look." I hiss. He turns, and we both watch. The driver's side door cracks open, but no one gets out yet. My heart's pounding so loud I can hear it in my ears. Linda's still on her porch, staring at her phone, totally missing it. The door stays open, like someone's about to step out but hasn't decided yet. I hold my breath, waiting. Is this it? Is this when we find out what's really going on? Mike whispers, "Dude, this is intense." I nod, too nervous to talk. But then nothing. The door shuts again, and the car goes quiet. What? I let out my breath and slump. False alarm, I mutter. Mike groans. Man, they're teasing us. We laugh, but it's a shaky laugh. My hunch is still there, stronger than ever. That car's not here by accident. Linda's call might have brought them, but I'm starting to think they were already on their way. Maybe they've been watching her. Maybe they know something she doesn't. She's pacing again, faster now, and her face is red. She's not the cool, calm HOA queen anymore, she's a mess. I pick up the ball and bounce it on my paddle, thump, trying to act normal. But I can't stop looking. The curtain moves again quick, like a flash. I point. There. See it? Mike nods. Yup. Definitely not a cat. We're both sure now someone's in Linda's house, hiding. Who? Why? My brain's spinning with ideas. Maybe it's a neighbor who's mad at her. Maybe it's someone working with the cops. Maybe it's, I don't know, someone with proof she's been bad. Whatever it is, it's making this day wilder than I ever expected. Linda's phone rings finally and she jumps like it shocked her. She answers fast, yelling, "What's taking so long?" I can hear her from my yard, she's that loud. She listens for a second, then snaps, "No, it's him. Across the street. Get over there." She's pointing at me again, trying to boss someone around. But the car doesn't move. No one comes my way. I grin at Mike. "She's losing it," I say. He laughs. "Big time." Linda hangs up, stomping her foot like a kid having a tantrum. She's not in charge anymore, and it's driving her nuts. That's when I know my hunch is right. This isn't about me. It's about her. That car, that call, that sneaky curtain, it's all pointing to Linda. She thought she'd scare me with the cops, but she's the one who's scared now. And whatever's coming, it's gonna turn this whole mess upside down. I hit the ball to Mike, ping, and he sends it back, pong. We're playing, but we're watching. The next move's gonna be huge, and I can't wait to see it. Alright, here we go, this is the big moment. Things are about to get wild, so buckle up. Me and Mike were standing by my ping pong table, watching everything across the street. The police car had been parked in Linda's driveway for a while now, all quiet and sneaky with its lights off. Linda was still on her porch, acting like she'd won some giant prize by calling the cops on me. She thought she'd scared me good with her big talk about my ping pong table being a disturbance. I was nervous, sure, my heart was thumping like crazy, but that car being at her house, not mine, had me thinking something else was up. And oh boy, was I right? So, here's what happened next. The driver's side door of the police car creaked open, slow at first, like in a movie. I held my breath, and Mike whispered, "Here we go." 2 officers stepped out. One was tall with a serious face, and the other was shorter with a clipboard in his hand. They didn't look happy, not smiley or friendly at all. They shut the car doors with a loud thump and started walking straight toward Linda's porch. My eyes got wide, and I nudged Mike. "Look," I said. He nodded, his mouth open like he couldn't believe it either. We were frozen, just staring, waiting to see what they'd do. Linda saw them coming, and oh man, she puffed up like a peacock. She strutted over to the edge of her porch, all proud and bossy, like she was the queen of everything. She pointed right at me across the street, her finger jabbing the air like I was some sneaky bad guy from a cartoon. "That's him," she shouted, her voice so loud it bounced off the houses. "That's the one. Arrest him for breaking HOA rules." She was yelling like she'd caught me robbing a bank or something, not just playing ping pong in my own yard. Her face was red, and her eyes were all wild, like she couldn't wait to see me in trouble. I swallowed hard. My paddle was still in my hand, and I gripped it tight. "Arrest me? For real?" I looked at Mike, and he shook his head. "No way," he muttered. "They're not buying it." But I wasn't so sure yet. I mean, Linda sounded so sure of herself, like she'd already won. What if the cops listened to her? What if they walked over and told me to take my table down or worse? My stomach flipped, and I started thinking fast. I'd tell them it's my yard, my table, and I wasn't hurting anyone. I'd stay calm, even if Linda was screaming like a crazy lady. But then here's the big twist: the officers didn't even look at me. Not a glance, not a peek, nothing. They kept their eyes on Linda, walking up her steps like I didn't exist. The tall one held up his hand, all serious-like, and said, "Ma'am, stop." His voice was deep and loud, cutting right through her yelling. Linda's mouth snapped shut, and she blinked at him, confused. The shorter officer stepped forward, holding that clipboard, and said, "We're not here for him. We're here for you." Boom, just like that. My jaw dropped again, and Mike let out a little whoa, next to me. Linda's face? It went white, like ghost white, paler than a sheet of paper. She looked like someone had dumped ice water on her head. I couldn't believe it. Neither could Mike. We just stood there, staring across the street, as the officers faced Linda on her own porch. She started stammering, her voice all shaky now. What? Me? No, no, you've got it wrong." She waved her hands around, like she could shoo them away. "It's him, Jake. He's the one with the table. He's breaking the rules." She pointed at me again, but it wasn't bossy anymore, it was desperate. She sounded like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar, trying to blame someone else. But the cops weren't falling for it. The tall one shook his head and said, "Ma'am, we know about the table. That's not why we're here." Mike grabbed my arm and whispered, "Dude, what's happening?" I shushed him, leaning forward to hear better. My heart was racing, but now it was excitement, not fear. Linda was in trouble, real trouble, and I had to know why. The shorter officer flipped a page on his clipboard and started reading. "Linda Carter," he said, all official like, "we've got reports about you. Lots of them." Linda's eyes got huge, and she took a step back, bumping into her porch railing. "Reports," she squeaked. "What reports? I'm the HOA president. I make the rules." The tall officer crossed his arms. "Yeah, about that," he said. "We've been watching you for weeks. Neighbors have been calling us." My ears perked up. Neighbors? Calling about Linda? This was getting good. The shorter one kept going. "Harassing people, making up fake rules, threatening fines." That sound familiar. Linda's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water, but no words came out. The officer didn't stop. "And then there's the HOA money. Where's it going, huh? Because it's not where it's supposed to be." Whoa. I nearly dropped my paddle. Mike gasped and said, "She's stealing." I nodded, my brain spinning. It all made sense now: those extra fines, the made-up rules, the way she bossed everyone around. Linda wasn't just mean, she was shady. She'd been pocketing HOA fees, taking money that was supposed to fix the street or buy new playground stuff. And the cops knew. They'd been watching her, waiting for the right moment. Her call about my ping pong table? It was like a gift to them, the perfect excuse to show up and catch her. Linda's face went from white to red in 2 seconds. "That's a lie," she yelled, stomping her foot. "I didn't steal anything. I'm keeping this neighborhood nice. You should be thanking me." She was shouting so loud I bet the whole street heard her. But the officers didn't budge. The tall one pulled out a little notebook and said, "We've got proof, ma'am. Bank records, complaints, even pictures. You've been busy." Pictures? Bank records? This was huge. Linda shook her head fast. "No, no, no. This is a mistake. It's him, arrest him." She pointed at me again, but it was weak now, like she knew it wouldn't work. The shorter officer sighed and said, "That 911 call you just made? About a disturbance? We were already on our way here. You just made it easier." Linda froze. Her hands dropped to her sides, and her phone slipped out, clattering onto the porch. She stared at it, then at the cops, then at me. Her eyes were big and scared, like a deer caught in headlights. I couldn't help it, I grinned. Big. Mike saw me and grinned too. "She's toast," he whispered. I nodded. "Yup." The tall officer stepped closer to her. "We need to talk inside," he said. "Let's go." Linda shook her head again, backing up. "No. You can't do this. I'm in charge here." But the shorter one held up his clipboard. "Not anymore," he said. "We've got a warrant." "A warrant? That's like a special paper that says they can search her house and take her in if she's bad." Linda's knees wobbled, and she grabbed the railing to stand up straight. "A warrant," she whispered. "For me?" The tall officer nodded. "Yup. Let's move." I couldn't stop watching. It was like a show, a really good one. Linda, the big, bossy HOA queen, was falling apart right in front of us. All her yelling, all her rules, all her mean stares, they didn't matter now. The cops had her number, and she couldn't talk her way out of it. Mike bounced the ping pong ball on the table, thump, thump, and said, "This is the best day ever." I laughed. Totally. Linda had thought she'd get me in trouble, but she'd dug her own hole. And it was deep. The officers started walking her toward her front door. She dragged her feet, still muttering, "This is wrong. You've got the wrong person." But they weren't listening. The tall one opened her door, and the shorter one followed her in. I saw that curtain move again just a little, and I realized someone must have been watching from inside. Maybe a neighbor who'd helped the cops. Maybe someone with proof. Whoever it was, they'd stayed hidden until now. The door shut behind Linda and the officers, and it got quiet again. Real quiet. Me and Mike just stood there, staring at her house. The police car sat in the driveway, all still and serious. My ping pong table was still up, still shiny, still fine. Linda's big plan had flopped big time. She'd called the cops to scare me, but they were already after her. Turns out, she was the real troublemaker all along. Harassing neighbors, faking reports, stealing money. She'd been sneaky for weeks, maybe months. And now she was caught. I looked at Mike and said, "Who's the bad guy now, huh?" He laughed loud. "Not you, dude. She's done." I grinned so big my cheeks hurt. Linda had strutted out like a winner, pointing at me like I was the problem. But the cops turned it all around. "We're here for you," they'd said, and her face, oh man, her face. It went white as a ghost, and I'd never forget it. She'd been dodging her own shady stuff, thinking she was untouchable. But that 911 call? It was like she handed the cops a golden ticket to bust her. The street felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Linda's porch was empty, her phone still lying there where it fell. The cops were inside with her, probably finding all the proof they needed. I pictured her yelling at them, trying to boss them around, but it wouldn't work. Not this time. She'd been caught red-handed, as they say. And me? I was just a guy with a ping pong table, having fun. Who's the real troublemaker now, huh? Not me, that's for sure. Okay, so here's what happened after the big reveal. It's the part where everything gets wrapped up, and boy, does it feel good. The cops were inside Linda's house with her, and me and Mike were still standing by my ping pong table, watching it all go down. Linda had just found out the police weren't there for me, they were there for her. Her face had gone white, then red, and she'd yelled a bunch, trying to blame me for everything. But the officers didn't care about her yelling. They had her number, and now it was time for her to face the music. Let's dive in. So, after the cops went inside with Linda, it got quiet for a minute. Me and Mike just stood there, holding our paddles, staring at her house. The police car was still parked in her driveway, all silent and serious, like it was waiting for something big. I could hear my heart thumping in my chest, not because I was scared anymore, but because I was excited. Linda, the big, bossy HOA queen, was in trouble, real trouble, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Mike bounced the ping pong ball on the table, thump, thump, and grinned at me. "She's toast, dude," he said. I nodded. "Yup, totally toast." Then the front door opened again. The tall officer came out first, holding a big stack of papers in his hands. They looked official, like the kind of papers you see in movies, with fancy writing and stamps on them. The shorter officer was right behind him, and guess who was with them? Linda. She wasn't strutting anymore, oh no. She was walking slow, her head down, and her hands were all fidgety. She didn't look like the HOA queen now. She looked small, like a kid who'd gotten caught sneaking candy. The officers were talking to her, but I couldn't hear everything, just bits like explain this and come with us. Linda tried to argue, I could see it. She lifted her head and started waving her arms around, her voice getting loud again. This is wrong, she shouted. I didn't do anything. You've got the wrong person. She was yelling like she could scare the cops away, just like she scared neighbors with her clipboard and rules. But these guys? They weren't scared. The tall officer held up his hand again, all calm and steady, and said, "Ma'am, stop. We've got proof." The shorter one handed her that stack of papers plop right into her shaky hands. "These are notices," he said. "You can't talk your way out of them." I leaned closer, trying to hear more. Mike whispered, "What's that mean?" I shrugged. "I think it's like a list of all the bad stuff she did. She's stuck now." Linda stared at the papers, flipping through them fast. Her face got redder and redder, and she kept shaking her head. "No, no, no," she said. "This is a mistake. I'm the president. I make the rules." But the tall officer just pointed at the car. "Not anymore," he said. "Let's go." Linda's mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't know what to say. For once, she was out of words, and that felt awesome. The officers started walking her down the steps. She dragged her feet, pulling back a little, like she didn't want to go. "You can't do this," she yelled one more time. But they could, and they did. The shorter officer took her arm, not hard, just firm, and guided her toward the police car. That's when she looked up and saw me. Oh boy, if looks could zap you, I'd be toast. She shot me one last dirty look, her eyes all squinty and mean, her lips tight like she was biting a lemon. She was mad, super mad, and she wanted me to know it. She probably thought this was all my fault, even though she was the one who called the cops. I didn't let it bug me. Nope, not one bit. I just smiled big and happy and waved at her. "Bye, Linda," I called, all cheery like. Mike laughed so hard he almost dropped his paddle. "Dude, you're savage," he said. I grinned and hit the ball over the net. Ping. Mike swung back Pong, and we kept playing, right there in my yard, like nothing was wrong. Linda's dirty look couldn't stop me. My table was still up, the sun was still shining, and she was the one in trouble, not me. The officers opened the back door of the police car, and Linda had to get in. She huffed and puffed, muttering stuff I couldn't hear, but she didn't fight anymore. She slid into the seat, and the tall officer shut the door. Thump. That sound felt final, like a big the end in a storybook. The shorter officer walked around to the driver's side, and the tall one got in next to him. Linda was in the back, all alone, staring out the window with that mad face. I could see her through the glass, still glaring, but it didn't matter. She wasn't calling the shots anymore. As the car started up, vroom, something cool happened. The neighbors started peeking out. Like, all of them. Mr. Thompson, the old guy next door, opened his curtains and looked out his window. His eyes got big when he saw Linda in the police car. Sarah, the nice mom down the street, stepped onto her porch with her little kids, pointing and whispering. Tim, the guy with the loud dog, poked his head out his door, and I swear I saw him smile. Even Mrs. Carter, the lady with the garden gnome, peeked over her fence. They were all watching, all talking, all wondering what was going on. I could hear bits of what they said. Mr. Thompson muttered, "About time." Sarah's kids giggled, and she shushed them, but she was smiling too. Tim's dog barked woof, woof, like it was happy Linda was leaving. The street was buzzing now, like a beehive waking up. People were whispering about how the mighty HOA Karen had finally fallen. That's what they called her, HOA Karen, because she was always bossing everyone around like a mean babysitter. But now she was in a police car, and her crown was gone. The car pulled out of her driveway, slow and steady, and rolled down the street. Linda's face pressed against the window as they passed my house, and I waved again just to be extra. She didn't wave back, big surprise. The car kept going, turning the corner, and then it was out of sight. Gone. Just like that. Me and Mike stopped playing for a second and looked at each other. "She's really gone," I said. Mike nodded. "Yup. Bye bye, Linda. We high-fived, and it felt like a win, a big, awesome win. The neighbors didn't go back inside right away. They stayed out, talking to each other. Mr. Thompson shuffled over to my yard, his watering can still in his hand. "Jake," he said, "what happened?" I grinned and told him the short version. Linda called the cops on my table, but they were already after her. "She's been stealing money and being mean." His eyebrows shot up. "Stealing? Well, I'll be." I knew she was trouble. Sarah walked over too, her kids skipping behind her. She yelled at my kids for their bikes, she said. "I'm glad she's gone." Tim joined us, his dog wagging its tail. "She fined me $50 for barking," he said. "Good riddance." We all stood there, chatting and laughing. The street felt different, like a weight was gone. Linda had ruled Maple Street for so long, making everyone follow her silly rules. No more garden gnomes, no more loud dogs, no more fun unless she said so. But now she was the one in trouble, and we were free. My ping pong table was still standing, right there in my yard, shiny and green. By the end of the day, it wasn't just a table, it was like a trophy. Linda had tried to take it down, but she'd lost. Big time. Mike and I started playing again, ping pong, and the sound was the best thing ever. Every time I hit the ball, I couldn't help but grin. The neighbors watched us for a bit, smiling and nodding. Mr. Thompson even said, "Good for you, Jake. Keep that table up." Sarah's kids ran over and asked, "Can we play?" I said, "Sure," and handed them the paddles. They giggled and swung, missing the ball half the time, but it was fun. Tim's dog barked and chased the ball when it rolled off, and we all laughed. The street was alive, happy and loud, and Linda wasn't there to stop it. I kept thinking about her in that car, holding those papers. The cops had told her she couldn't wiggle out of it, they had proof. Stealing HOA money, harassing people, faking reports she'd been sneaky, but not sneaky enough. Her little 911 call about my table? It was like she'd opened the door for them to catch her. She'd thought she was so smart, pointing at me and yelling, "Arrest him." But the officers turned it around, "We're here for you," and that was that. Justice served, right on her own porch. As the sun started to set, the sky turned orange and pink. The air got cooler, and the kids gave us back the paddles. "Thanks, Jake," they said, running off with Sarah. Mr. Thompson waved and went inside, and Tim took his dog home. It was just me and Mike again, playing under the fading light, ping pong. My grin wouldn't go away. Every smack of the paddle felt like a little cheer. Linda wasn't calling the shots anymore, she was gone, and the street was ours. Well, not ours like we owned it, but ours to enjoy without her mean rules. I pictured Linda at the police station, trying to boss the officers around. "I'm the HOA president," she'd yell, but they'd just shake their heads. Those papers, those official notices, were her undoing. She couldn't argue with bank records or neighbor complaints. She'd pushed too far, and now she was paying for it. Meanwhile, my table stayed up, and I kept playing. The neighbors weren't whispering anymore, they were smiling, waving, living a little freer. Linda's fall made everything better. By nighttime, the street was quiet again, but it was a good quiet, not the creepy kind from before. Mike headed home, and I folded up the table to put it away, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It done its job. I carried it inside, still grinning, and every ping and pong echoed in my head. Linda had shot me that dirty look, but I'd waved her off, and that felt like the real win. She wasn't the queen anymore, Maple Street was done with her. And me? I was just a guy with a ping pong table, happy as could be. Hey, everyone. We're at the end of this wild story now, and I've got some thoughts to share. You've been with me through all the crazy stuff, Linda calling the cops on my ping pong table, the police showing up at her house, and her getting caught for being sneaky and mean. It's been a ride, right? So, here's the thing I want you to think about: sometimes the loudest people, the ones who act like they're the boss of everything, are the ones hiding the most. Let's talk about that. Linda was loud, super loud. She'd yell at me, wave her clipboard, and tell everyone what to do. She thought she was in charge of Maple Street, like a queen with a crown made of rules. She'd stomp around, saying my ping pong table was bad, telling Mr. Thompson his tree was wrong, and fining Tim for his dog barking. She acted big and tough, like no one could stop her. And when she called the cops on me, she thought she'd scare me so bad I'd take my table down and hide. She was sure she'd win, pointing at me like I was the troublemaker. But guess what? She didn't see her own mess coming, and it was a big one. See, Linda was hiding stuff. She wasn't just bossy, she was sneaky. She took HOA money that wasn't hers, made up fake rules, and picked on people until they gave up. She thought no one would notice, but they did. The neighbors whispered, the cops watched, and her little phone call about my table? It was like she accidentally turned on a spotlight right on herself. She didn't know it, but she was tripping over her own game. All that yelling and pointing couldn't hide what she'd done. And when the cops said, "We're here for you," her loud voice got quiet real fast. She wasn't the queen anymore, she was just a lady in trouble. That's what I mean, don't judge a guy by his ping pong table. I'm not loud. I don't boss people around or make big scenes. I just wanted to play a game in my yard with my buddy Mike. Linda saw me and thought, he's small, he's quiet, I can scare him easy. But I didn't scare. I kept playing ping pong, and watched her mess up all by herself. The quiet ones, like me, might not shout or fight, but we see things. We wait. And sometimes, we're the ones standing tall when the loud ones fall. Linda tripped over her own tricks, and I was still there, grinning with my paddle in my hand. It makes me think about bullies. You know, those people who act big and mean to make you feel small. Maybe you've met one. Maybe at school, there's a kid who yells a lot or tells everyone what to do. Or maybe in your neighborhood, there's someone like Linda, bossing people around. They seem strong, right? Like they can't lose. But here's the secret, a lot of times, they're hiding something. Maybe they're scared, or maybe they're doing wrong stuff they don't want you to know. Linda was loud because she had to cover up her sneaky side. But when the truth came out, bam, she wasn't so big anymore. So, what do you think? Have you ever seen a bully get what they deserve? Like, maybe someone was mean to you or your friends, and then something happened, they got caught, or they messed up, and everyone saw who they really were. It feels good, doesn't it? When the loud ones fall, and the quiet ones win. That's what happened here. Linda thought she could scare me with a phone call, but she didn't see her own downfall sneaking up. The cops came, the neighbors cheered, and my ping pong table stayed right where it was. Justice, right? I want you to remember this, you don't have to be loud to be strong. You can be quiet, like me, and still come out on top. Don't let the bullies trick you into thinking they're better. Keep doing your thing, playing your game, being yourself, and watch them trip over their own feet. Linda learned that the hard way. She thought she ruled the street, but she didn't. We did, the neighbors, the kids, the dogs, and me with my table. We're the ones who matter, not her. So, drop a comment below, tell me your stories. Have you ever seen a bully lose, like Linda did? Maybe it was at school, or with a neighbor, or even in a game. I want to hear all about it. Let's keep this story going, you and me. And next time you see someone acting big and loud, just smile and think of Linda. Sometimes the quiet ones win, and the loud ones, they don't see it coming. Keep being awesome, okay? See you in the comments.